When the world goes quiet, some voices still remain. Not every soul finds peace when the clock strikes 12. There are stories hidden in the shadows, whispers drifting between the living and the forgotten. Some stories linger, some souls don't leave. Welcome to Stillness After Midnight, where every silence tells a story. If you're drawn to the mysteries that stir after dark, the voices that echo when the world sleeps, subscribe now and join us as we listen to the souls who still have something to say. Because in the stillness, the truth finally speaks. I woke up with soil in my mouth, but I didn't have a mouth. I remember tasting iron, not blood, rust, like the inside of a forgotten rifle barrel. Then the light came, gray, low, dim like a memory that refuses to fade. I blinked. No, I didn't. Something inside me blinked. I was on my back, on pine needles slick with dew that never evaporates. The trees above me stood still, too still, like they'd seen something and decided never to move again. The sky was wrong, split in the middle, a thin, jagged seam running across the heavens like a wound that never scabbed. From it, something dripped. Not rain, not blood, black, thick, slow. I tried to scream. Nothing came out, only wind, not from my lungs, but from the forest. Then I heard it. You woke up too late. John, a whisper, not made of words. The trees said it, or maybe the ground. Maybe it was me. I sat up. My hands looked like mine, but not quite. My skin was pale, no, transparent, veins like rivers of smoke. And I had no heartbeat. I touched my chest, flat, cold, hollow. I wasn't breathing, but I was aware, deeply, terribly aware. Where am I? I asked the silence. It answered by holding its breath. I looked around. The forest wasn't dead, it was listening. Then I saw her, a white-tailed deer, standing at the edge of the clearing, half shadowed by mist that clung to her body like mourning cloth. She didn't run. She didn't flinch. She stared, eyes like molten glass, reflecting not just me, but something behind me I couldn't see. I blinked, for a moment, just a flicker. Her face was mine, my young face, 16, smiling with arrogance and bloodlust. And then it was gone. Just a deer again, still watching. I stumbled backward. No, I whispered. No, no, no. I'm dreaming. I hit my head. I'm in a hospital somewhere. This isn't real. But the deer took one step forward. Her hooves made no sound. The sky cracked louder. That seam above me, the wound, widened slightly. A single eye blinked through the tear. Human? No. Older. I dropped to my knees. This is hell, I said. This is hell. But hell would have been honest. This was worse. This was truth. The deer turned, not to flee, but to guide. She walked slowly, into the trees that now curved downward, like they were leaning in to watch. I didn't want to follow, but I stood. My feet moved without asking, because something inside me, not memory but guilt, was pulling me forward. I followed her, and the forest changed. The trees whispered in voices I almost recognized. The wind said my name in different tones. John. Merritt. Do you remember what you did? I clenched my fists. I don't understand. The path twisted, but there was no real direction. Just movement, like walking through a thought instead of a place. And then I felt it. The first pain. Not mine. Hers. I dropped to the ground, clutching my stomach. I gasped. No air. The cold wasn't around me. It was inside me. My legs trembled. My lungs stopped. My heart gone. And I was her, the deer, The first one, the one I shot behind my father's house when I was 16, I felt her fear, the confusion, the realization that something had pierced her body and her legs wouldn't move. The way the world began to blur, not from tears and from death. I felt her fall. I felt the needle stab into her side. I felt the blood, warm at first, then cold, and then I saw him, me, the boy, walking over with a smile too wide, a grin carved from ignorance. The boy who thought killing made him a man. She saw him. I saw me. And I screamed. Not aloud. Inside. The memory snapped. I collapsed into the present, or what passed for it in this place. I coughed. My mouth poured smoke. My hands were shaking like broken branches. My chest ached with a heartbeat I didn't have. The deer stood over me again. Silent. Still. But now, I couldn't meet her eyes because I knew. I didn't kill for food. I didn't kill for survival. I killed for the feeling. And now, the feeling had turned into a cage. Why? I whispered, voice barely mine. Why show me this? The deer blinked. Behind her, the trees parted, and I saw them. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Eyes, watching. Some glowed yellow, others red. One pair, bright blue, like glass marbles. The eyes of everything I had ever silenced. Then came the sound, a slow, dragging noise, like antlers scratching stone, like bones against bark. Something behind me was coming, not fast, not hunting, summoning. I turned, but there was nothing. Only the shadow of something I hadn't earned the right to see. I backed up, breathless, blind. The deer spoke, not aloud, but into my spine. This is not punishment. This is memory, and memory never forgets. I fell to my knees. The sky above throbbed. The wound in it widened. The air tasted like morning. And I, John Merritt, hunter, killer, man, finally understood the first truth of this place. I was no longer the predator. I was the prey, and my trial had just begun. The trees moved like breath, not in the wind. There was no wind, but in rhythm. Slow, mournful, like lungs too tired to fight another night of sleep. They leaned inward as I followed her. The deer, deeper into the woods that weren't woods, down a path that didn't exist the second before I stepped on it. Every branch above seemed to reach toward me, not like trees, like fingers. I felt watched, not with eyes, with memory. The deer didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her silence screamed, and it pulled me forward. The path narrowed. The light, if it could be called that, thinned like mist dying in morning, and the trees began to bend into shapes I couldn't name. I looked up. One branch hung low. It had no leaves, only teeth, tiny white things, hundreds of them, dangling like fruit from another world. They clicked together in the silence. Tick, tick, tick. Behind me, I heard footsteps, not hoof, not boot, something, dragging. I turned, nothing, only trees, watching. The deer stopped. She stood at the center of a small hollow. The moss there was black and soft as ash. Above us, the sky split again, and this time, the tear glowed red like an old wound infected with light. She looked at me, and then she stepped aside, and I fell, not forward, not down, inward. The forest collapsed like paper folding into a shape I couldn't comprehend, and my soul, if that's what was left of me, slipped into something ancient. I became her. I didn't imagine her. I didn't dream her. I was her. The moment the change came, it didn't feel foreign. It felt right. My breath came sharp through a snout I didn't recognize but understood. My ears flicked. My muscles twitched with awareness, tuned to every vibration of the ground. My body, her body, carried 1,000 memories I never lived, but somehow now remembered. I took a step, soft, cautious. I was in a forest familiar, yet untouched. The scent of frost tickled my senses. Somewhere behind me, a stream. Ahead, the warmth of sunlight through the trees. And then, the air broke. It didn't make a sound, but something broke, like an invisible string that snapped in the wind. My heart, her heart, thudded. I froze. A presence. Sharp. Cold. Wrong. I turned my head. There he was. Me. 16. Tall. Too proud. Too still. He was watching. Through the scope. He saw a target. Not a being. And she, saw death. The shot came before I could think. A crack. A scream that never reached the mouth. My legs folded. The ground rushed up like punishment. Pain bloomed through ribs, lungs, spine. I tried to breathe. Nothing. I tried to run. Nothing. The world swam, tilted. Everything hurt, but not like injury, like betrayal. Why? Why did this happen? There was no warning, no reason, no escape. I lay there as her, feeling the heat of life leak into the soil. And then, he came, boots crushing dry leaves. Crunch, crunch. Closer. He stood over me, smiled, lowered the gun, not to shoot again, to pose. The rifle like a trophy, the deer like a photo, the death like a moment of pride. Got her? He said, his voice, my voice, rang like glass against bone. I wanted to scream, but she didn't scream. She just watched. And then, darkness. I came back howling. My body, or whatever I had now, writhed on the ground. My hands clawed the earth like it owed me answers. My mouth opened wide enough to tear, but no sound came. Just breathless sobs from lungs that weren't real. My face was wet, my arms shaking. I cried like something ancient. No! I choked. No, I didn't know! But I had, and now I couldn't unknow. The deer stood above me again, unmoving, watching. But this time, her eyes were not soft. They were old, heavy, judging. I tried to look away, but her gaze followed me, into the earth, into my thoughts, into the places I used to bury what I called sport. Why are you doing this to me? I gasped. Why now? She didn't answer, but something did. From behind the trees, a sound, slow and heavy, like antlers scraping metal. A groan, deep as the ocean, stirred in the distance. Then whispers, not words, accusations. You fed on silence. You killed for hunger that wasn't yours. You took and never bled. I pressed my palms to my ears. Stop it. I didn't know. I was just a kid. The forest responded with something worse than noise. Memory. I blinked, and for a moment, I saw dozens of faces, not human, but animal. Each with my eyes, each blinking in a perfect unison. They didn't blink tears. They blinked truth. And then, as fast as it came, the vision vanished. The deer turned away, her head bowed slightly. Not in forgiveness, in acknowledgement. The first trial was done. I lay on the ground, broken, breathless, begging for silence. But silence no longer belonged to me. The wind rustled, carrying voices I couldn't block out. One word, over and over. Remember, remember, remember. And I knew now, this place wasn't hell. Hell is fire. Hell is punishment. This was older. This was justice. The forest stopped breathing. No wind, no motion, no echo. Even the leaves hung in the air like they'd been caught mid-fall and frozen by some invisible decree. I stood up, or thought I did. Everything around me had the weight of reality, but none of the rules. Distance felt stretched. Shadows curled around my feet like vines that didn't want to touch me, only observe. The deer had gone. She left no tracks, no trail, no scent, but her silence remained, clinging to my skin like frostbite. And behind it came something worse, anticipation. I stepped forward into a clearing that wasn't there a second ago. It opened like a wound in the woods, circular, too symmetrical to be natural. The ground was dark, velvet soft, and silent underfoot. Trees surrounded it like towering sentinels, leaning inward, their tops lost in a fog that pulsed like lungs holding in grief. And that's when I realized I wasn't alone. They were there, not people, not quite animals. Shapes, figures cloaked in fur, bone and shadow. Eyes gleamed from every direction. Orange, gold, silver, dim blue like ice. Some sat like judges, others stood like executioners. All of them still, but all of them watching me. The chamber had no ceiling, but I felt enclosed, like the sky itself had turned its gaze downward to witness this moment. My breath was shallow, my limbs shook. One step, two. I moved toward the center. No voice welcomed me, no gavel struck, but I knew I was on trial. I tried to speak. My name is John Merritt. The trees groaned, a low, ancient sound, not angry, not warning, just acknowledging. They knew. Of course they knew. I kept going. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't understand it was wrong. A whisper cut me off. Not a word. A feeling. Liar. It filled the chamber like water in a sinking room. I staggered, clutched my head. The forest hadn't forgotten. The chamber hadn't forgiven. And deep down, neither had I. From the left, a figure stepped forward, not walking, gliding, tall, draped in shadow fur. Its face was obscured, but two horns curved out like antlers made of scorched wood. It raised no hand, made no sound, but the world around me shifted. The ground melted, not into liquid, but into memory. I stood now on the porch of my father's cabin, 15 years old. The morning sun slanted across the trees. Inside, I could hear my father's voice. A man's got to kill something to feel like a man. Son. I remembered that morning, the rifle in my hand, the weight of it, the fear, and the hunger. Not for food, for proof. Proof I was worthy. Proof I could take. Back in the chamber, I dropped to my knees. I was just a boy, I whispered, but the eyes didn't blink. Boys become men, and men choose, and I had chosen. Over and over again, the figure vanished. Another stepped forward, shorter, stockier, the silhouette of a bear, bones woven into its fur like beads. It moved to the edge of the circle and stopped. And suddenly, I heard her, not her voice, her heartbeat. I was back in the snow, holding the scope steady. A black bear, massive and lumbering, emerged from behind a cluster of trees. I had waited hours. The shot lined up. Perfect. But just before I pulled the trigger, a second shadow moved. A cub. She was protecting it, and I fired anyway. The chamber reeled. I dropped again, this time clutching my chest. I felt the bullet tear through her side. I felt the pain, not sharp, but deep, massive, total. I felt her eyes shift, not in fear, in helplessness. He killed me because I existed, her memory said, and I wept. I'm sorry, I whispered, broken, but nothing replied, because here, sorry was irrelevant. This was not a courtroom built for apology. It was built for truth. More figures emerged, silent, towering. Each carried a memory. Each carried a witness. A fox, small, elegant, watching from the tree line. A hawk circling above with bleeding wings. A raccoon, limping, dragging a snare I'd set for sport. Each one closer, each one closer, each one staring. I was surrounded by everything I had forgotten. Everything I had reduced to trophy, story, or silence. And now, they remembered me. Then the forest moved again, not with wind, with judgment. The trees leaned farther, the roots cracked open. From the ground, dozens of antlers rose, not attached to bodies, just bone, pure, white, reaching. They encircled me. I couldn't move, couldn't run. All I could do was tremble, not from cold, from knowing. Knowing that I was no longer a hunter, no longer a man. Here, I was only a witness to my own truth, and the truth didn't scream. It whispered. You always knew, and you never stopped. I fell flat on the ground, forehead to soil. I waited for pain, fire, chains. None came, only silence, stillness. And it was worse, because in that stillness, I heard everything I tried to bury. Every breath taken before a shot. Every look of confusion in the eyes of something dying. Every heartbeat that didn't get to finish. And then, a voice, not from the forest, not from the shadows, from inside me. You're not here to be punished. You're here to remember. I curled into myself, like a child, like a corpse. The eyes around me didn't blink. They just watched me come undone, watched the truth peel my skin from soul, watched the beginning of my end. They never blinked, not once. Not when I fell to the ground sobbing, not when I tried to speak, not when I begged for silence. They just watched. Hundreds of them, all around me. Eyes hung in the trees like fruit, embedded in the bark, glowing under roots, beneath the soil, peeking from hollows. Every direction, every angle, every breath I took was swallowed by their attention. Some were wide and glassy, the eyes of prey, others narrow, slit, and gold, the eyes of hunters I once thought I understood. Some human, some more than human. And in every pair, I saw me, not the man I told myself I was, the man I pretended to be, the stories I told around campfires, in bars, to strangers who clapped me on the back and called me a real one. No, they saw the version of me I couldn't face, and now neither could I. I stood in the center of them, surrounded, exposed, and utterly transparent. No skin, no ego, just raw memory. The clearing, the chamber of stillness, no longer held still. It breathed. Each eye blinked in a slow, perfect rhythm, a pulse, like a heartbeat outside my chest. Then the whispers began, low, dissonant, not words, judgments. Remember me. You laughed when I fell. I bled into your boots. You didn't look away. I covered my ears, but the voices weren't outside me. They were inside. And then they began to show me, one by one, not in order, not with mercy. A hawk, spiraling, screaming. I remembered the arrow, meant to impress a friend. I clipped its wing mid-flight. It hit the ground like a stone, flapped in circles, tearing at the air. I didn't kill it. I left it. For the foxes, a raccoon, cornered near a trash bin, eyes glowing in the flashlight beam. It hissed, lunged, not to bite, but to flee. I shot it anyway, not out of fear, out of boredom. A young doe, winter, starving. She walked into the clearing like she didn't care anymore. Like death would be kinder than the cold. And I gave her that death, like a gift she hadn't asked for. I posed next to her body, smiling. My father said, "That's how you put food on the table." We never ate her, each memory carved into me, not as flashbacks, as testimonies. Every image, every moment, replayed through their eyes. Not mine. I was no longer the hero of my stories. I was the villain in theirs. The eyes moved now, swaying gently, like leaves in stormless wind. A low hum vibrated through the soil. My legs buckled. I fell to all fours, retching. Nothing came out, only smoke. Thick, bitter, like the residue of all the lives I'd turned to ashes. And then I saw it, the wall, behind the eyes, just beyond the trees. Something began to rise from the earth. A wall made not of stone, but of trophies, antlers, bones, feathers, claws, skulls, pelts, hundreds of them, layered, interwoven, bound together with old rope and broken memory. It was tall, endless, alive, and at the center of it all, a door, carved from ribs, bleeding sap that hissed in the air. I didn't want to go near it, but my feet, they moved. Each step forward peeled something from me. A name, a moment, a lie. When I reached the door, I reached for the handle, a jawbone, still lined with cracked teeth. It burned when I touched it, but I opened it anyway. And inside, my house, my actual house, but not as I remembered it. Dark, dust-covered, mounted heads still on the wall. Deer, boar, bobcat, but their eyes were real now. They blinked, they watched, and their mouths moved, not to speak, to breathe, heavy, rattling breaths, like dying never finished, like they were still stuck in the moment I stole their lives. I walked inside. The photos were still there, me in camo, rifle in hand, next to carcasses, framed, admired, shared. But the photos began to change. My smile blurred. My eyes turned black. The bodies beside me opened their mouths once and whispered, "I begged you. I had a mate. I had fear. And you made it a story." The house trembled. Antlers pushed through the floor. Teeth grew from the couch cushions. Feathers rained from the ceiling, each one soaked in blood that vanished before it touched the ground. I screamed. I ran outside, back into the chamber, back to the jury of eyes. But something had changed. The clearing wasn't empty anymore. In the center now stood a mirror, tall, cracked, covered in frost, and behind the glass, not my reflection. Them, all of them, every creature I had ever taken, layered over one another, moving as one soul, one wound, and at the very center of them all, me, smiling, rifle in hand, frozen in that moment of pride. I collapsed before it, broke in a way I didn't know was possible. "I didn't know," I whispered. Then louder, "I didn't know." But even as I said it, I heard my own voice from some distant past, laughing, bragging, saying, "If it moves, shoot it." And now, I couldn't stop hearing it. The eyes blinked in unison. One beat, two, three, then everything. The forest, the mirror, the breath of memory, faded into a darkness so deep it rang like bells underwater. And in that darkness, something whispered, "This is only the beginning." The air had weight now, not like weather, like judgment. It pressed against my skin, heavy with memory. Every breath I took scraped down my throat like it didn't belong to me. And maybe it didn't. I had no idea how long I'd been in this place, this world stitched from silence and consequence. Time didn't move forward here. It folded, collapsed in on itself like a carcass left too long in the sun. The eyes had gone, the mirror too, but the stillness remained. And in that stillness, I heard it. The growl, low, long, deep enough to rattle the marrow I no longer had. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even loud. It was warning. A sound made by something not afraid to die, but willing to kill before it did. I turned. She was there. The bear. Massive. Towering. Her fur was matted with snow and blood. Her eyes, not wide like prey, but narrow, focused, fierce. But not at me. No. At something behind me. I spun around. A cub. Small. Barely walking. Sniffing the frozen air. The bear stepped between us. A wall of breath and instinct. And I knew what this was. I knew what came next. The air cracked. The forest bent. And I fell again. Not to the ground. Into her. Her body. Her strength. Her senses. Everything changed. I wasn't wearing her. I was her. I felt her heartbeat. Massive and calm. I felt the cold of the snow beneath her pads. The smell of pine, smoke, and danger. I turned my head, her head, toward the cub. Her cub. The one she had pulled from the den just days before. The one that still tripped over its own feet. The one who hadn't learned fear yet. And then I smelled it. Me. Gun oil. Leather. Human sweat. She didn't know what it meant, but she knew it wasn't right. She growled, a low, rising thunder from her throat. She stood upright, towered over the trees, and I felt it. Not rage, protection, not fear, defiance. She would die for him. She would die for him. And then, the shot. It tore through her ribs, hot, white. The force knocked her sideways. She staggered, roared. But it wasn't pain that made her scream. It was fear for the cub. The bullet didn't kill her. Not right away. She dropped to all fours. Charged. Another shot. This one hit lower. Tore through muscle. She faltered, but still she moved. Because she couldn't not. Because something older than pain drove her. Older than words. Older than me. She reached the cub, wrapped her body around it, covered it in her warmth. And there, beneath the snow, blood and branches, she waited. I felt it all. The sting, the burn, the breath slowing, the knowledge that she would not see another spring, the ache in her limbs, the cold in her belly. But still, she held. Still, she breathed. Every second she could buy for her cub was a second she would pay for an agony. And when her heart finally stopped, it did so slowly, not a sudden end, a retreat. As if the soul refused to leave until it knew the cub had gone far enough. And then I was ripped from her, dragged back into my own skin. Screaming, I collapsed into the dirt, clawed at the ground, my back arched in pain I didn't deserve. My God, I gasped. Oh my God. But God didn't answer. Only the forest did. A voice, deep and bitter. You didn't kill a bear. You stole a mother. The world around me flickered. For a moment, I saw the cub, older now, alone, scarred, wild-eyed, searching the woods for a scent that would never return. He didn't die, but he didn't survive either. He just endured, and I had made that happen. I sat up, blood on my hands was not mine. I stared at them, watched the red fade into my palms like ink into paper. It wouldn't wash off, not here, not ever. And then I saw myself across the clearing, a version of me, younger, smirking, rifle on his shoulder, walking toward the dead bear. He didn't run, didn't pause. Just stood over her, admiring the shot. He reached down and plucked a single tooth from her mouth, tied it on a chain, wore it like a medal. I vomited, or tried to. My body shook. I didn't know. I sobbed. I didn't understand. But even as the words came out, I knew. I had understood. Not in words, but in silence. In that quiet look she gave me before dying. Not hatred, not fear. Just a question. Why did you pull the trigger? If I was only protecting what I loved. The clearing dimmed. The trees turned their backs. The snow melted. And all that was left was me, kneeling, alone, and somewhere deep in the ground, beneath the roots, beneath the bones, beneath the silence, a heart kept beating, slow, heavy, distant, as if reminding me this was not over. This was only one life, and I had taken so many more. The forest spat me out like a secret it no longer wanted to keep. One moment, I was kneeling beside the memory of the bear, my skin still soaked in a pain not mine. And the next, the world had twisted again. The trees thinned. The ground hardened beneath my feet. The air shifted from ancient and earthen to dry, splintered, familiar. I looked up, and my breath caught in a throat I didn't have. There it was, the cabin, my cabin, exactly as I remembered it. 2 windows in front, paint peeling from the siding. The antler-shaped wind chime hanging crooked over the porch. The door was cracked open, like it had been waiting for me, but something was wrong. The sky above it was dead. No star, no moon, just a gray expanse, like ash frozen in the air. In the cabin, it breathed. The wooden slats pulsed slightly, as if the structure itself had lungs. I could feel it, a rhythm too slow to be human, too heavy to be natural, a pulse, a warning. But I walked forward anyway, because that place held everything I had once been proud of. And now, it held the things that wanted me to remember what pride had cost. The porch creaked beneath my feet, not like wood, but like bone. I stepped inside, and the door closed behind me on its own. The cabin was cold, but not the kind of cold that numbs, the kind that remembers. The walls were lined with trophies, just as I left them. Deer heads, bear paws, foxtails, stuffed birds with outstretched wings nailed above doorways, antlers arranged like a crown over the fireplace. And in the center of the mantel, my favorite piece, a 10-point buck, eyes glassed, jaw open just enough to show its teeth. I had stood beneath that head for years, drink in hand, story on tongue. I'd pointed to it every time someone new came into the cabin. Got that one just north of Elk River, clean shot, dropped him in one. They always nodded, admired, envied. But now, the cabin was listening, and the trophies weren't dead. Not entirely. The deer's mouth twitched. Its glass eyes followed me across the room. The bear's paw shifted slightly on the nail. The beak of the hawk above the door opened a fraction wider. They didn't move like living things. They moved like things that remembered living. I turned to the kitchen. The counters were coated in dried blood. The fridge door hung open. Inside, antlers, piled like logs. Some broken, some still glistening wet. A single note lay on the table. In my own handwriting, "They saw you smile." My fingers trembled as I stepped into the back room. The trophy wall. I built it myself, years ago. Every kill that meant something had a place there. Photos, tags, teeth, fur. Even the bullets I'd extracted from carcasses, polished and labeled. Now, the wall breathed with the same rhythm as the cabin. Each artifact pulsed, a photo curled at the corners, and bled. I stepped closer. It was a picture of me, maybe 10 years ago, rifle in one hand, holding the head of a mountain lion by its ears. I was grinning, but now the mouth of the lion was open, and its eyes had turned, black, bleeding, and full of awareness. And behind me in the photo, a shape that hadn't been there before, tall, shadowed, antlers for fingers, watching me. I turned. The cabin whispered. Floorboards groaned, not with weight, but regret. The fire pit lit itself, but the flames were wrong. They didn't crackle. They whispered. Voices, low, whispered in animal tongues. I could feel them in my teeth. I backed into the living room, and that's when the heads on the wall began to speak. Not with mouths, with eyes. They blinked, one by one, and as they did, the cabin began to shift. The walls melted, the air rippled, and then I was in every moment again. One scene, then another. I stood beside my younger self, watching me skin a fox while laughing. I saw my hands pry open the mouth of a coyote just to pull out a cracked tooth for a necklace. I heard myself say things I'd forgotten I ever said. If it moves, drop it. Meat's meat. Pain don't matter once they're mounted. I wanted to scream, but the cabin had taken my voice, because now it was mine. It knew every lie I'd told inside it, every excuse, every toast, and it was tired of being my witness. The fireplace roared. The deer above it opened its mouth wider, and from within, a sound, not a growl, not a scream, a sob, soft, feminine, human. I froze. It wasn't an animal. It was a woman, someone I'd once known. No, something that had seen too much. The spirit of every creature made spectacle, a voice without a body, speaking from within a shell I had hung like a decoration. And it said, "Do you remember what you felt the day you stopped feeling anything?" I couldn't answer, because I did remember. It wasn't a moment. It was a shift, a slow erasure. The first few times I pulled the trigger, I felt it. A sting, a sorrow. Something sharp and bitter, but it dulled. It always dulls, and then it vanishes, until the only thing left is ritual. And that ritual becomes identity. The cabin darkened. The heads on the wall began to hum, deep and low, like a dirge for things that never had funerals. The walls bent inward. The floor cracked. Roots burst from beneath the boards, climbing up my legs, wrapping around my arms, not to crush me, to keep me still, to force me to look. One last photo blinked to life above the fireplace. Me, alone, older, empty. A smile that didn't reach the eyes. The caption read, "The Last Hunt." I collapsed, hands over my face, whispers all around me. You killed more than bodies. You killed silence. You killed reverence. And as the fire burned cold and the antlers reached down from the rafters like crooked fingers, I understood. The cabin wasn't a home. It was a museum of unspoken grief, and I had built it, board by board, kill by kill. Memory by memory, I wandered for what felt like hours after the cabin swallowed itself. The trees were quiet again, not the kind of quiet that soothes, the kind that waits, like the earth itself was holding its breath. My legs moved without thought. My feet found no path, just endless soil, and roots like veins in dying skin. I wanted to believe I was alone, but I wasn't. I could feel it, a presence behind me, just out of sight, watching, tracking, no sound, no footsteps, but eyes. I could feel them like tiny hooks in my spine. And then, a voice, small, light, like a child whispering beneath a blanket. Do you remember me? I turned, and there it was. A fox, small, young, orange fur dusted with ash, its ears twitching, eyes bright, too bright. It didn't run, didn't snarl. It sat, still, waiting. I froze. Of all the creatures I'd faced, this one unsettled me most, because there was no anger in its gaze, only curiosity. The fox tilted its head. You weren't hungry that day. The words didn't come from its mouth. They dropped into my mind like stones into still water. I opened my lips, closed them. I remembered. Of course I remembered. It was spring. I had hiked up past the creek, just to clear my head. No rifle, just my sidearm, out of habit more than intent. The sun was soft, the air warm, and then I saw it. The fox, young, alone, digging near a log, probably for grubs or beetles. It didn't see me at first. It was beautiful, small and sharp, tail fluffed like smoke, ears twitching. I watched it for a moment, and then I shot it. No reason, no threat, just the twitch in my finger and the lie in my mind that whispered, "You are the top of the chain." The memory faded. The fox blinked slowly. "Why did you do it?" Its voice was soft, but the weight of that question crushed me more than any roar or a claw ever could. I knelt. "I don't know," I said, "but I did." The fox took a step forward. Was I a target? I shook my head. Was I a trophy? No. Was I dangerous? No. Then why? I couldn't answer. My throat clenched. Tears stung. Because I could, I finally whispered. The fox nodded, not with understanding, with finality. It walked in a circle around me, tail swishing gently. "You didn't just kill me, John. You stole the moment I would have mated, the den I would have dug, the cubs I would have raised. You killed not one life, but all the lives inside me." I clutched my chest. My heart, long silent, thudded once, a phantom pulse. "I didn't think about that," I said. "No," the fox replied. "Because you didn't have to." It stopped before me, eyes glinting like amber under flame. "You always thought size mattered. That suffering only counted when it came from something big. But pain is not measured in pounds." I collapsed, face in the dirt, sobbing. "I'm sorry," I said, over and over. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." But the fox didn't move, didn't answer, because this wasn't about apology, it was about awareness. From the forest behind it, dozens more foxes emerged, silent, shadowed, small. Each one walked around me, slow, deliberate. Not to punish, to bear witness. They circled me like the moon circles the earth, distant, inevitable. And then, as one, they stopped. Each raised their head, each blinked, and in that single, synchronized motion, I saw it. Not death, absence. The space I had carved in the world, the missing, the lives never lived, the echoes never sung, the families never formed, and I realized, killing doesn't just end something, it prevents everything else. The fox looked at me one last time, its voice now almost a whisper. "You thought because I was small, I didn't matter. Now you know better." It turned, walked into the dark, vanished like smoke. The others followed, one by one, until the clearing was empty again, except for me, alone. Crushed beneath a question that had no answer. The silence after the foxes left was not silence. It was memory. It breathed differently, like a room where someone has just finished speaking a terrible truth, and everyone chooses to stay quiet because no words could be worthy enough to follow. I stood slowly. My legs felt weak. My hands trembled not from fear anymore, but from the realization that there was no one left to blame. No beast, no darkness, no voice outside myself. Only me. And the forest. Always the forest. I took a step. The ground shuddered. It wasn't dramatic. There was no earthquake, no rumble, just a slight shift, like a sigh beneath the soil. Another step, and something whispered beneath my feet. Not in word, in feeling. Recognition. The roots remembered me. The path ahead was not marked by stone or branches. It was marked by what had been lost. As I walked, trees leaned subtly to the side. Their bark stretched thin in places like scar tissue. Moss grew in strange, broken shapes, forming outlines of animals that once ran here, now imprinted like shadows that refused to fade. I reached a tree that bore my name, not carved, grown. The bark curved inward, forming each letter, John, beneath it, a rough etching of a deer's skull, antlers bent, eyes hollow. I touched it, and the tree winced. Its bark split slightly beneath my fingers, and sap bled out like tears. It wasn't angry. It was mourning. The wind stirred. It didn't pass over me. It passed through me, and in it, I heard voices again. But this time, not accusatory, just remembering. He came this way in October. He stepped on the den. He picked up the feather and laughed. Every movement I had ever made in this forest, cataloged, not as vengeance, as history. I wasn't being punished. I was being shown the truth. The forest was not a place. It was a witness. Every stone I'd kicked, every shell casing I dropped, every blade of grass I'd crushed under boot, it remembered. And now, it was returning the favor. I moved through a glade where I'd once chased a buck for sport. The trees there had grown crooked, their trunks twisted like bodies turned away in pain. The wind didn't whistle, it moaned. And then I heard it, the sound of footsteps behind me. I turned. Nothing, just trees. Then again, footsteps, slow, crunch, crunch. But no one was there, because it wasn't someone following me. It was me, chasing the memory of who I had been. I was being haunted by my own echo. I ran, faster than I should have been able to. The forest didn't resist. It opened, trees bowed, branches pulled back. And as I ran, I saw my footprints light up beneath me, glowing faint red like embers. They weren't new. They were old. I was running the same path I'd walked years ago. Only now, I could see what I had been blind to then. The animals watching from the shadows, the nests I'd crushed, the cries I hadn't heard. I stopped at a small clearing. The center of it was barren, burned. I remembered, 5 years ago, I had set up a camp here, left a fire going too long. It hadn't spread far, just enough to kill a patch of growth. I hadn't thought much of it, just another black mark on a green place. But now, I stepped into the clearing, and the earth beneath me groaned. The trees around it stood twisted in shapes of agony. Their branches curled like fingers pulling at throats. The wind here carried smoke, though no flame burned. "This is where we stop growing," the forest whispered, not angrily, just fact. I fell to my knees, pressed my hands to the dirt. "I didn't know," I said. Again, the same plea, the same defense. But this time, I didn't believe it. I knew, somewhere deep down, I always had. The forest pulsed beneath me. And then, I felt it, a presence, massive, not physical, but real, a consciousness, not God, not the devil, something older, the forest itself. It leaned into my mind like fog into a valley, and it asked, "Why do you think we kept growing after you left?" I had no answer, because that question didn't demand one. It was the answer. I stood by everywhere I looked. I saw it now. The imprint of my passage, not just in deaths, but in disruption. I hadn't walked this forest. I had scarred it, and it had let me, because that is what the wild does. It absorbs, it endures, it remembers, but it never forgets. I turned back, and the path behind me was gone, not overgrown, erased, like the forest had decided, you've walked that part, you don't get to walk it again. Then a silence, true silence, the kind that comes not from absence, but from acceptance. The forest didn't hate me, but it didn't welcome me either. I was no longer predator, no longer intruder. I was history, a scar that had learned how to bleed. And I knew then, whatever came next, the forest wouldn't stop it, because this wasn't its punishment, it was mine. It began with the absence of sound. No chirp, no call, no wings slicing the wind, just air, still and heavy, like breath that never made it out of the lungs. I stood at the edge of a dry meadow. Yellowed grass bent in one direction as if a great gust had passed and never come back. Above me, the sky stretched wide and open, too open, empty, the kind of sky that should have held movement, a hawk soaring, a finch dancing from branch to branch, a crow cackling from the pines, but there was nothing, just silence. It rang in my ears like a siren. Then I heard it, a whistle, short, sharp, followed by a thud, soft, like feather on flesh. I turned slowly, a single bird, a robin, lying on the ground behind me, still, wings tucked wrong, beak open, dead. Another whistle, another thud, and then they began to fall, one by one, from nowhere, from everywhere. Birds rained from the sky without flapping, without blood, without screams. Sparrows, jays, doves, wrens. They didn't crash. They settled, like leaves too tired to float anymore. Within seconds, the meadow was littered with still wings and broken songs. I collapsed to my knees. "What is this?" I whispered. "Why?" But I knew. Of course I knew. I remembered the day, years ago. A group of us, beer in hand, laughter too loud. We sat on the back deck of my buddy's cabin. Someone handed me a pellet gun. "Bet you can't hit 5 in a row," he said, pointing toward the power lines where the birds like to perch. I grinned, took aim, laughed when they dropped. Feathers fluttered like victory confetti. We didn't even collect the bodies, just moved on to the next round. Now, they'd come back, not in anger, in absence. The forest wasn't showing me their pain. It was showing me the hole they left behind. A crow landed near my foot. It didn't look at me. It looked at the sky. Its feathers trembled, its head tilted. And then, it opened its beak, not to caw, to sing, but no sound came, just silence. It tried again, louder, longer, still nothing. And then it dropped, dead, like the song itself had abandoned its body. I screamed, "Stop it! I didn't mean to kill them all. It was just fun," a voice whispered. Not a voice made of breath, a voice made of echo. It didn't come from a bird. It came from everywhere, from the trees, from the grass, from the sky. Was it fun when the branches went quiet? Was it fun when nests went empty? Was it fun when spring forgot how to return? The air shimmered, and the meadow changed. I stood in the same place, but years earlier. The trees were greener, the sky full of flutters. Birds danced in the wind. They sang, so many of them. I watched them, not from the eyes of a hunter this time, but as a man waking up from a coma. Their songs wove through the trees like music made by the soul itself. And then, the gunshot. My gun. My laugh. Another shot. Another. Another. Until the sky fractured. Until the trees quieted. Until there was no music left. The world blurred. Returned to now. Back to the void. And I wept. For the first time. Not from guilt. From longing. From the loss of something so small and so vital. I looked to the trees. They were still, branches bare, no nests, no flutter, no wind. I spoke aloud. I never realized how much life was in your songs. The forest replied, that is how extinction begins. Not with fire, but with forgetting. A feather floated down in front of me. It didn't land. It hovered, weightless, timeless, and on it, words began to form, not written, grown, letters made of tiny vines. You can't undo the silence you left behind. I reached for the feather, it turned to dust, and the wind, the real wind, returned. Not loud, just enough to make me feel what I had missed. I stood slowly, and for the first time, I didn't feel hunted, didn't feel hated, didn't even feel judged. I felt grieved, as if the forest had tried, year after year, to replace what I'd taken and failed. Because some things don't come back, not in seasons, not in time, not in forgiveness. They simply go. I looked up. The sky was blue again, but still empty, still waiting, and somewhere far above it, in places I could no longer reach. The birds waited too. There was no warning this time, no sound, no shift in the wind, no tremble in the trees, just a feeling, like something ancient had stepped into the space beside me. Not threatening, but absolute. I turned slowly, and there he was, a wolf, standing still beneath the skeleton of a tree long dead. Silver fur, thick and ragged, like it had weathered 100 winters. Eyes not yellow, but pale blue, almost white, like frost over still water. He didn't growl. He didn't snarl. He didn't blink. He simply looked at me, and I knew him, not by name, because he had none, but by absence. He was the one I didn't kill. I remembered the day. It was years ago. I had tracked him for hours. His paw prints circled a ravine. His scent was faint, but I was good at reading signs. I'd found him drinking from a frozen stream. He saw me. I raised the rifle. He didn't run. He stood, ears up, eyes locked on mine. Something in his stillness, in that unblinking gaze, made me freeze. Not from fear, from understanding. I lowered the gun and walked away. I told that story later like it meant something, like I'd done a noble thing, but the truth was simpler. I didn't shoot because I didn't feel like it. Now he stood before me again, not angry, not grateful, just present, like a memory finally cashing itself in. He stepped forward. Each paw pressed the ground like a priest stepping into a sacred place. Why did you let me live? His voice, not sound, not speech, but clear in my mind. I hesitated. Because you weren't afraid, I said quietly. He blinked once. So, courage earns mercy? I didn't answer. Was I worthy of life because I didn't flinch? I looked down. I don't know. No cubs behind me. No mate to mourn me. No story to soften the loss. He circled me once. Slow, measured. Yet I walked away. And so did you. He paused beside me. I could feel his breath, warm, sharp with wildness, against my hand. That was the day you told yourself you weren't like the others. You used me, To forgive yourself, the words hit harder than any accusation, because they were true. I had worn that moment for years like a medal. I told it around fires, in lodges, to friends, each time polishing it more. Let a wolf live once, I'd say. Didn't feel right to shoot. They'd nod, admire, say I had heart, but I never said how many others I had killed. How many looked at me with the same stillness and were met with lead instead of mercy. The wolf lay down at my feet, tail curled, eyes still on mine. You thought you spared me, but I was never yours to take. I didn't live because you let me. I lived because I was meant to. Silence stretched between us, but not empty. Heavy, it swelled with everything I couldn't say. He stood again, walked slowly toward the edge of the clearing, stopped. You knew how to stop, but you chose when. He looked over his shoulder. That's worse than never knowing. Then he was gone, not into shadow, not into wind, just gone, like a truth accepted, like a lesson finished. I remained standing for a long time, frozen in the echo of his question. If you could stop, why didn't you? The forest around me shifted, not in shape, in mood. It no longer leaned in to accuse. It simply watched, to see what I would do next, to see who I was now, without excuses. I took a breath, or something like it, looked down at my hands, the same hands that had once held so many triggers. They didn't shake, they didn't burn, they just waited, like they were asking me, finally, what will you carry next, John? And for the first time, I didn't have an answer, only the knowledge that no matter what I said, the forest would remember. I don't know how long I wandered after the wolf vanished. Hours, years. Or maybe time had died in this place long before I ever arrived. The forest didn't speak anymore. The trees no longer watched. They simply existed, like sentinels that had finished their shift and now only waited for the inevitable. And I walked until the ground changed, from soft soil to something harder, sharper. My boots, or what passed for them now, clicked against something unnatural. I looked down and stopped breathing. Bones, thousands of them, small, large, curved, broken. They paved the earth like tile, arranged perfectly, clean, bleached by time and silence. Each step forward was a whisper of lives ended. I knelt, picked one up, a sparrow's rib, so light it could have been breath itself. And yet, it had once held in the heart of a thing that flew. Now it was here, beneath me, supporting me, as if I had ever deserved that grace. The trees parted, and I saw it at the center of the bone path, a mirror, 10 feet tall. Framed in antlers, twisted into spirals. Its surface was not glass, but bone dust, pressed flat and polished until it shone like water under moonlight. It didn't reflect light, it absorbed it, and within it, I saw myself, but not as I was, not as I had been. The thing in the mirror looked like me, yes, but taller, thinner. Its skin was drawn too tight across its bones. Its mouth was fixed in a permanent grin, not of joy, but of performance. A hunter's grin, the one I used to wear for photos, for crowds, for pride. Only now, the eyes behind it were hollow, not dead, just emptied, scooped clean by regret. I stepped closer. The reflection did not mimic me. It moved before I did. It watched me, tilting its head. Then slowly, it raised its hands. And I saw what I'd never wanted to see. My fingers were trophies, each digit carved from a different creature. My index was a coyote's claw, my thumb, the jawbone of a rabbit, my palms, stitched from bird wings. My spine, A trail of vertebrae too small, too human. My chest, what was hollow, not metaphorically, literally, the rib cage was gone, replaced by a cavity that echoed with every movement, an empty case where something called a soul used to live. I fell to my knees. No, I whispered, but the mirror didn't shatter. It didn't punish. It just showed. It revealed. It reflected the shape my choices had carved. And that shape was monstrous, not by design, but by neglect. The mirror began to change. Slowly, the reflection blurred, and then reshaped. The figure became dozens. Every version of me. The boy holding his first kill. The teenager grinning beside a limp fox. The man laughing over a campfire, beer in hand, antlers in the back of his truck. The old man staring into a wall of heads, too proud to ask why they never looked back. And behind them all, the shadow, the one I'd seen before, tall, antlers for hands, teeth like splinters of ivory. It reached forward from behind the glass and pressed its palm to the surface, a perfect match to mine. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I stepped closer, pressed my palm to the same spot, and the mirror warmed, not with heat, with remembrance. Voices began to echo, but not in the air, inside the mirror. I was just feeding. I had 3 fawns. I only wanted to cross the road. I was singing. Hundreds, thousands. Each a moment I ended. Each a life I touched without knowing. Or worse, without caring. The surface rippled. The bones behind the glass began to shift, one by one. The skeletons of animals began to emerge in the reflection. They didn't move. They just stared, not accusing, just present. A congregation of the dead, waiting to be seen. And for the first time, I saw them, not as kills, not as mounts, as selves. Each one a world I had erased. The mirror flickered. My reflection returned. But it was different now. The hollow grin was gone. The mouth had softened. The eyes were filled with water, mine. And slowly, the reflection raised a single finger and pointed, not at me, at my chest. I looked down and saw the hollow again. But this time, something flickered inside it. A small light, faint, unsteady, but real. It pulsed with a rhythm I hadn't felt in so long, a heartbeat. And then the mirror whispered, "You are what you've done, but you are not only what you've done. To see it is the beginning." The glass cracked, a thin fracture, straight down the center. It didn't shatter. It just split, and I understood. The mirror wasn't punishing me. It was giving me the choice to look. I turned, walked away, didn't run, didn't hide. And as I stepped off the bone path, I heard the mirror's voice, one last time. "May your second shape be gentler than your first." The forest was still, not silent, just done. The trees no longer leaned. The bones no longer whispered. The mirror had cracked, but not broken, like truth that had finally been spoken aloud. I walked without knowing where I was going. No path, no guide, only a gentle pull, like gravity, but in the soul. And then it came, not from above, not from behind, but from within the world itself. The wind, it didn't blow, it arrived. A current with no temperature, no direction, no beginning. It passed through me like memory, and I stopped walking because I knew what this was. It wasn't air, it was verdict. For the first time, something spoke to me, not in voice, not in image, but in presence. The wind curled around my face, lifted my hair, pressed its invisible fingers into my chest, and it asked, not with sound, but with knowing. Do you understand now? I didn't speak. I couldn't, so I nodded. Tears rolled down my face. Not from fear. From something worse. Recognition. The wind swirled again, and this time it carried voices. Not new ones. Ones I had forgotten. Laughed over. Buried beneath pride. He was just a kid. Let him shoot. That's a clean kill. Put it on the wall. Don't name what you eat. They came like old songs, sung out of tune, and behind them, the real voices. I had a mate. I was only watching the sky. I didn't run because I didn't think I had to. I never got to teach my cubs. Each phrase caught in the wind, spun like leaves, and disappeared. And then, silence again. But it wasn't empty. It was waiting. The wind circled me. Once, twice, 3 times, then stopped. It gathered in front of me, a swirl of dust and petals, leaves and ash. And there, in the center, a single feather floated. I recognized it. The one I had shot off a bird once, mid-flight. Never found the body, never even looked. The feather had found me instead. It hovered before my chest, and the wind spoke again. You are not cursed, John. You are consequence. The words didn't feel like chains. They felt like truth. The kind that doesn't come to hurt you, but refuses to let you go until you finally, stop lying to yourself. The wind continued. You have walked with the dead. You have worn their eyes. You have listened to the silence you left behind. Now, walk with yourself. The feather touched my chest, where the hollow had been, and it stayed. Didn't fall, didn't vanish, just stayed. Inside, a weightless memory, now given form. And then the wind faded, not left, just released me. The forest shifted, not with violence, with breath. The leaves swayed gently. Birdsong didn't return, not yet, but the air made space for it, like the land was healing itself, one root at a time. I sat beneath an old pine, my back against its bark, my hands open on my knees. Nothing hurt, nothing moved. I just sat, still, alive, changed, and somewhere in the breeze, I heard it, a whisper that wasn't mine, not from any beast, not from the forest, just wind, plain, honest, and eternal. This is not about forgiveness. It is about remembrance. The forest thinned, not in branches or leaves, in time. Everything around me began to blur, not from fog or shadow, but from remembrance tightening like a noose. I knew where I was going, though I didn't remember choosing the direction. It wasn't a place, it was a moment. The trees gave way to younger trunks, the moss grew sparser, and the trail underfoot became unmistakable. Flattened grass, boot prints too familiar, a shallow stream to the right, and there, the clearing, the one from all those years ago, the one where I first pulled the trigger, where I first stepped into manhood, or so I believed. But this time, I wasn't 16, and I wasn't alone. I stood at the edge, hidden behind a line of brush. And in the clearing, me, a boy, gangly, nervous, rifle in hand, fingertips trembling from adrenaline, not cold, eyes locked on a young doe grazing near a patch of ferns. She was beautiful, still, curious, unaware, and I, the older me, watched as he took aim. The forest held its breath, and for the first time, I felt the world hesitate, not to stop the shot, but to see what I would do now. I stepped forward. My boots made no sound. The boy didn't see me. I walked up beside him. He stared through the scope, tongue pressing the corner of his lip, breath shallow, so sure of himself, so desperate to be something. I whispered, "Don't." He didn't hear me, Or maybe he couldn't. He was too full of stories told by men with knives on their belts and heads on their walls. Too full of hunger to belong. The rifle clicked softly as he tightened his grip. I reached out, instinctively, and tried to touch him. My hand passed through. Not like smoke, like shame. The doe looked up, straight at us, into me, into him. And for a moment, one moment, I saw her eyes change. From wildness to recognition. She knew. She didn't run, didn't flee. She simply stood there, as if to say, "You have a choice." I turned back to the boy, and for the first time, he turned to me. Our eyes met. His widened, not in fear, in fascination. "Who are you?" he asked. I hesitated. Someone who forgot what this moment meant. He looked down at the gun, then back at me. His voice was barely a breath. "Am I going to do it?" I couldn't answer, because I didn't know anymore. This wasn't a memory. It was a crossroads, and I was standing in both versions of myself. I knelt beside him. "I know why you want to," I said. "You think it'll make you something." He nodded slowly. "I want to tell my dad." Of course he did. I smiled, a smile full of sorrow. I told him. He clapped me on the back, gave me his flask, called me a man. The boy's eyes lit up. "That sounds good." I shook my head. It wasn't. It only sounded good the first time. Then it became a pattern. Then it became me. The rifle shifted in his hands. He looked down at it. "It feels heavy now." "That's because it is," I said. "Not the metal, the moment." He stared at the doe. She hadn't moved, still waiting, still offering the same impossible grace nature always offers, the chance to walk away. The boy looked at me again. "What happens if I don't shoot?" I swallowed hard. I could feel the answer caught my chest. "It'll hurt," I said. "People will laugh. Say you hesitated. Say you don't have it in you." He flinched. "But," I added, "you'll keep something they gave up a long time ago." He tilted his head. "What?" "Reverence." He sat there, quiet, the gun resting on his knees, his hands no longer tight. He stared at the doe, and for the first time, saw her for what she was. Not a symbol, not a trophy. Just a life, a heartbeat, a creature who would die if he twitched the wrong way. And she waited, not with fear, but with invitation, to choose differently. I closed my eyes, prayed to whatever spirit ruled this place, if any did. Let him walk away. Please let this version of me be braver than I was. I opened my eyes, and the boy stood. He lowered the rifle, took a breath, and smiled. Not the proud smile of conquest, the quiet smile of someone who just learned that restraint is harder than violence. He turned to me. "I think I'll keep this moment. I won't shoot, but I'll remember I could have." And with that, he faded. Not in smoke, not in light, just gone. As if he had returned to the boy I never was, but always wished I had been. I stood in the clearing alone. The doe was gone. The sun had shifted, and in its warmth, I felt something grow in my chest. A heartbeat, no longer hollow, no longer frantic, just steady. The wind stirred the grass. The trees sighed softly, and I looked to the sky. No words, no verdict, just space, like the world had accepted that I had finally chosen. Not perfectly, not heroically, but honestly. And that was enough. For now. I stood alone. No beasts, no spirits, no echo, just forest, old, quiet, breathing, and me, smaller than ever. Not because the trees had grown taller, not because the sky stretched wider, but because something inside me had finally collapsed. The walls, the excuses, the myths I'd built around myself like armor, they had all fallen, and now there was only one thing left to do. I walked to the center of a clearing I didn't recognize, but felt I'd always belonged to. There was no altar, no fire, no audience, only a stump, a wide, cracked tree base, charred black around the edges, its center hollowed out, like a chest that had been emptied long ago. I sat on it, hands resting on my knees, and I waited. The wind didn't move, the birds didn't sing, the trees didn't speak, but I did. "I'm sorry," I whispered. No one answered, and I didn't expect them to. "I'm sorry for calling it sport," I said, "for making death a hobby, a weekend escape. I'm sorry for laughing when they fell, for posing like a king beside a corpse. I'm sorry for forgetting they had eyes that looked back and hearts that beat just like mine." I paused, closed my eyes, breathed. The words came easier now, not like confessions, like truths finally unclenched. I'm sorry for the ones who bled out slowly, the ones I didn't kill clean, the ones I didn't bother to find. For the bear who died shielding her cub, for the birds who never sang again, for the fox who just wanted to dig, and the deer who met me with innocence and got a bullet instead. I opened my eyes. They burned, but no tears came. There was no water left in me, only fire and the ash it left behind. "I'm sorry," I said again, and this time the wind moved, just slightly, just enough to ruffle the edge of my shirt, to remind me the world still turned, even now, even after all I'd done. "I know you don't need my apology," I said to no one in particular. "Most of you can't even hear it, but I needed to say it. For me," the trees creaked, old wood shifting in joints unseen, not in approval, not in anger, just movement, just life continuing. I looked up. The sky was pale, almost soft, like it had forgotten how to be angry, like it was giving me this last moment, not as reward, but as space to release. "I wanted to be proud," I said, "to be someone men respected, and I thought death could buy me that. But it didn't. It just left me emptier." The forest didn't respond, but I felt something, a pull, gentle, like the gravity of forgiveness, not given by others, but granted by truth. I stood, hands loose at my sides, no rifle, no medals, no trophies, just bones beneath me, sky above me, and breath I hadn't realized I was still holding. I stepped away from the stump and turned back to it. I bowed my head, just once, a gesture not of worship, not of grief, but of accountability. "I can't undo what I've done," I said, "but maybe now I won't keep adding to it." The trees rustled, a breeze moved through, and for the first time since I'd arrived in this place, however long ago that was, I felt lighter, not redeemed, not freed, but honest. And somehow, that was enough. As I walked away, I didn't look back, not because I didn't care, but because I no longer needed to carry it in front of me. It would always be behind me, etched into the path I could never erase. But now, I was walking forward. The forest didn't fade. The sky didn't split open. There was no stairway of light, no hand reaching down, no voice saying, "You're free now." Only silence, the soft kind, the kind that stays behind after grief, when even sadness has grown tired. And I was still here, not trapped, not punished, just present, as if the forest had nothing left to say and was waiting to see what I would do with the quiet. I walked, no destination, No markers, just space and breath. Each step felt lighter than the last, not because I was healed, but because I'd finally stopped dragging the weight of denial. It had taken the voice of every creature I ever silenced to teach me one thing. Some truths don't punish you, they remake you. I stopped at a hill overlooking the canopy. The wind brushed my cheek, and I sat, not to rest, to stay, because this is where I belong now. Not in cities, not in camps, not in firelit lodges full of heads on walls, but here, where no one clapped when I stood still, where no one praised restraint, because restraint is the natural state of those who understand reverence. I am not forgiven. That's not how this works. Forgiveness is human, but this place is older than forgiveness. It only remembers, and now so do I. I still see them. Sometimes, the fox, the bear, the bird, the deer I never named. They don't speak anymore. They don't need to. Their presence in the wind, in the branches, in the slow falling of leaves. It's enough. It reminds me. I was part of something once, and I broke it. Now I am part of it again, not as a hunter, not as a man, but as a shadow between trees, as silence that lingers after a footstep, as the moment just before a creature looks up, sensing that something old is watching. And if you're hearing this, if my voice has somehow reached your ears in the dark, then maybe you've stepped into the edge of this forest too. Maybe you've heard the stillness grow louder than your own heartbeat. Maybe you felt something watching you, not to harm, but to remember. Maybe you're about to make a choice, a small one, perhaps a pull of a trigger, a tightening of fingers, a decision so quick it doesn't even feel like a decision at all, but it is. So I ask you, from wherever I now exist, will you pause? Will you let the silence speak first? Will you ask yourself, do I need to take this life, or am I only trying to feel powerful? Because I've been where you are. I've worn that moment like a badge, and I've paid for it with more than blood, with memory, with echo, with eternity. I am still here. Not because I must be, because I choose to be, as warning, as witness, as the shape your shadow might take when you walk too far into the woods without asking permission. I don't need you to remember me. Just remember, everything that breathes wants to keep breathing, even if it can't say it, especially then. So if you feel me in the wind, if the trees fall silent as you pass, if a bird flies away too quickly and leaves behind only the echo of its absence, know this: I am not haunting you. I am reminding you. Thanks for watching the whole video. Please give me a like and subscribe to the channel to watch more interesting stories.